Committee will come to order. Good afternoon. Welcome to our public witness hearing for the American Indian and Alaska Native programs. I want to welcome all the distinguished tribal elders and leaders here today and to thank our witnesses for appearing for the committee, before the committee and sharing your concerns on these important topics. I will call each panel of witnesses to the table, one panel at a time. Each witness will have 5 minutes to present testimony. That's 5 minutes to present testimony. The full written testimony will be included in the record, so witnesses shouldn't have to feel pressured to cover everything in 5 minutes. And I was told we actually do read the testimony that you submit to us, so we appreciate that. We will be using a timer to track the progress of each witness. When the light turns yellow, the witness will have 1 minute remaining to conclude their remarks. When the light turns red, I'll have to ask the witnesses to stop so that we can remain on schedule. We'll hear from every witness on each panel before members will be provided an opportunity to ask questions. I request that we try to keep things moving so that we can stay on schedule and respect each other's times. We may have votes later on this afternoon, but we hope to conclude this afternoon's witnesses before we have to go vote. Otherwise, we'll have to break, and then we'll be gone for an hour before we come back and stuff. So we'll try to keep it on schedule. I also wanted to note that the committee rules prohibit the use of outside cameras and audio equipment during these hearings. The hearings can be viewed in its entirety on the committee's website, and an official hearing transcript will be available at gpo.gov. You don't know how hard it is not to say GOP. .gov. You know, I'm sorry, but it's gpo.gov. Yeah. Now I'm happy to yield to Ms. McCullum for any opening statements she might have.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I wouldn't just say dem.gov. I'd have to say DFL, Democratic Farmer Labor Party. From
That's right.
So
you guys are confusing up there.
We're very confusing, so watch out for us. I would like to really repeat the chairman's warm welcome to the second day of public hearings on tribal programs under the jurisdiction of this committee. And I think that the chair deserves a big round of applause because he said no to no one. And so we're doing 3 days, which is unprecedented in the history of this committee. So thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I do want to, you deserve it. It's only been a few short weeks since the Trump administration's been in office, and many of us feel like chaos has been unleashed and the disruptions have impacted everyone across this country, including indigenous communities. And for many, it's created an anxiety and uncertainty for tribal members for their employment status, the continuation of critical health care needs, education services, and some have even felt challenged with their citizenship. And we heard from tribal brothers and sisters from the southern part of the United States, and I know that we in the bold north, and we do have some people from Minnesota here today, and Michigan, also have tribal IDs that go back and forth. And if you've had any encounters, please let us know. So we hope to hear from you on how these this chaos is impacting your feelings on being able to deliver service to your employees because of cuts in some of the administrative branches that deliver trust and treaty responsibilities back to you. So like the hearings yesterday, we got a lot of information. I'm looking forward to learning more. And thank you again, Mr. Chair. It's a pleasure to be here on this committee with you. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you don't all know that Betty was the chairman of this committee for a while, and then the ranking member. We served together for many terms on this, and then she decided that she was going to go be the ranking member on the Defense Appropriations Committee, but she still stayed here on this committee, so it's great to have you here. Our first panel is Grant Johnson, Anna Miller, and Stephen Selam. Is that right? Selam? Okay. Come on up. Nice beadwork.
Thank you.
I like that.
This actually was my grandpa's. So.
Seriously.
Yeah. Yep.
It is some beautiful beadwork that we get to see these 3 days that come in and stuff. It's amazing stuff. Yeah. Okay, Grant, you're first.
Perfect. Is it on? Perfect. How and Petu Washte, Chairman Simpson, and distinguished members of the subcommittee and Congresswoman McCollum. My name is Grant Johnson, and I'm the president of the Prairie Island Indian Community. Our tribe is grateful to be invited to testify today, and we thank you for you prioritizing the funding needs of Indian country. Our tribe and our Mdewakanton Dakota ancestors have lived in southern Minnesota for countless generations, but the federal government took our land from us in the 19th century. A small fraction of our homelands was later acquired for us at Prairie Island in the Mississippi River. That land forms the core of our reservation today. Unfortunately, the federal government also built and licensed infrastructure projects on Prairie Island that benefit other communities at our expense. This includes the construction of a federal dam in the 1930s that routinely floods our reservation. Prairie Island has been subject to multiple major flood events in the last 3 decades, most recently in 2023. The youngest generations of our tribal members have experienced these events 4 times already, something most other Americans never experience in a lifetime. We regularly use our own resources to construct expensive safeguards to protect our citizens and their homes, our cultural sites, tribal offices, and the businesses that fund our government. Making matters worse, over our longstanding objections since the early 1970s, the federal government has licensed the continued operation of a nuclear power plant less than 700 yards from our reservation. The federal government also has licensed storage of more than 1,000 tons of nuclear waste at that plant, a number that will likely double to 2,000 tons of nuclear waste stored there. Because of our close proximity to the plant and nuclear waste storage site, our tribal members are exposed to constant low-dose radiation emissions, various nuclear-related incidents, and the continuing threat of catastrophic nuclear activity. These federal infrastructure projects threaten the health and safety of our members and the continued viability of our tribal economy. We know of no other community in America forced to live in such close proximity to such hazards. To ensure that our people and our economy are protected, we used our own money to purchase additional land at a safe distance away. A portion of the land, known as Elk Run, has been placed into trust and is now part of our tribal land base. We await action from the Department of Interior to put the rest of Elk Run into trust. It is against this backdrop that we urge the subcommittee to prioritize 3 categories for federal funding. First, we need federal resources to develop infrastructure, housing, and employment opportunities at Elk Run. The federal government played a primary role in the creation of the threats at Prairie Island. Yet our tribe has had to spend significant resources to secure a safe homeland for our people. Much work remains to be done. We urge the subcommittee to fully fund programs that help tribes finance and build roads, water and sewer infrastructure, housing, and economic development on tribal lands. It is also crucial that the Bureau of Indian Affairs is adequately staffed to provide the necessary review and approval for leases, rights-of-way, and other development-related agreements. Second, more federal funding is needed to support public safety in Indian country. Given the severe threats faced by our tribe, public safety and emergency response infrastructure is critical for the protection of our citizens, patrons, and employees. But current appropriations do not come close to meeting our tribes or Indian country's public safety needs. BIA estimated it would cost over $1.7 billion to fully fund Indian country law enforcement services, with another $1.5 billion needed for tribal courts. We urge Congress to prioritize funding to meet these needs. Finally, we need funding for the preparation of a comprehensive emergency plan. Without adequate planning, chaos inherently follows an emergency event. Yet our federal trustee has never developed an emergency plan to respond to and recover from the threats that we face at Prairie Island. If and when an emergency takes place, we have nowhere to go to coordinate communications with the multiple federal agencies that would be involved. We need a single point of contact to be identified, and funding for the development of a tribal emergency response and recovery plan. This requested funding is compelled by the federal government's general trust responsibility to us, particularly given that the life-threatening risks we face are federally created and facilitated. So thank you for your time today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Anna, you're next.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman Simpson and distinguished members of the subcommittee. I'm Anna Miller, Secretary for the Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians. I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify today and for your continuing commitment to Indian country. First, I just want to start off by saying we need more funding for education of Native students. A large portion of Native students attend public schools. Most public school districts rely on local property taxes to fund the educational costs. But as you know, tribal lands are not taxed. So public school districts that serve Native children often lack the financial resources necessary to meet the needs of our children. This is true for the school district that serves our tribe. Over half of the children enrolled in the local school are tribal members. Funding from the Department of Education's Impact Aid program does help the problem, but it falls short. Our school district's budget is a small fraction of what our neighboring school district gets, causing significant disparities in educational opportunities for our children. The Department of the Interior's Johnson O'Malley program funding does support the Native American students and helps lessen the significant gap, but left by the Impact Aid program. For FY25, BIE requested $22.6 million for the Johnson O'Malley program. We urge that FY26 funding needs to be substantially increased, especially given the current lack of clarity regarding the fate of the Department of Education. Second, more federal funding is needed for IHS physicians and personnel. Even though providing health care services to Native Americans is a federal trust obligation, the agency is chronically underfunded. As a result, Native Americans have significantly higher rates of death from heart disease, stroke, diabetes, chronic liver disease, and alcohol and drug-related causes. Increased funding and adequate federal workforce are critical to address these disparities. Recent estimates of the amount needed to fully fund IHS healthcare related services is close to $47 billion. Yet only $8.5 billion has been provided for IHS in the most recent version of the FY25 appropriation bills. IHS has struggled to fill vacancies and retain physicians, which negatively impacts the health care available to our tribal members. Obstacles to recruiting and retaining physicians in Indian country include compensation, long commutes, lack of housing, and lack of public transportation. We need significant improvement in these areas. The tribe respectfully requests that the subcommittee provide increased, consistent appropriations for IHS, including continuing to provide advance appropriations. We also would appreciate any clarity the subcommittee can bring to recent reports that there may be further cuts to IHS personnel. We also need more housing support. We're blessed to live in a beautiful area in northern Michigan, but because it's so beautiful, a lot of other people want to live there as well. The housing costs in our area have skyrocketed, making it hard for our tribal members and our employees to find affordable housing. While HUD's ICDBG does help, those funds are inadequate. For this reason, funding for EPA state and tribal assistance grants to support local drinking water and wastewater infrastructure are critical to supplement tribal affordable housing. Also critical is IHS's sanitation facilities program, which supports development and construction of safe drinking water, wastewater, and solid waste systems. We urge the subcommittee to support adequate funding for these EPA and IHS programs. Finally, more support is needed to provide adequate care for our tribal elders. Tribal elders pass down cultural traditions, teachings, and our language, helping to preserve these for future generations. But access to programs and services for these most vulnerable members of our community lags well behind our actual need. Our tribal housing stock includes only 16 senior living units, so a significant number of elders are waiting for access. We urge the subcommittee to support funding and staff for BIA's Direct Assistance Program. This program is urgently needed because it provides residential care and home care services for our elders. We also urge that the subcommittee support funding and staff for IHS Elder Services, including the agency's programs related to Alzheimer's disease, dementia, and programs that prevent, detect, and address elder abuse. Miigwech, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Anna. Seven?
Nikwachwai Winishash Lishwalatam Ku question Wiki Stephen Selam Kud Shash Yakamapa. Honorable committee members, my name is Stephen Selam. I currently serve as Executive Secretary for the Yakama Nation, the largest tribal nation in the Pacific Northwest. I've submitted a detailed written report, which I will summarize. However, before doing so, I want to thank Chairman Simpson and the committee members for holding these hearings and for your continued commitment to engage with tribal nations. Your efforts to uphold the government-to-government relationship is the foundation for federal Indian policy. And I appreciate your time and attention to these. I appreciate your time and attention to these critical issues. I come before you with a clear message. The United States must uphold its treaty and trust responsibilities to the Yakama Nation. The federal government's commitment to us is not discretionary. They are legally binding obligations established through our treaty, statutes, and court decisions. Yet year after year, we find ourselves fighting for the resources necessary to fulfill these obligations. The Yakama Nation does not have the same revenue as state and local governments. We cannot make up for shortfalls when federal funding is reduced or delayed. The programs we rely on are not handouts. They are the means by which the federal government fulfills its duties under the Yakama Nation's Treaty of 1855. While the federal trust treaty obligations are broad, there are several urgent priorities that demand immediate attention. These are not abstract policy issues. They are real challenges that impact the daily lives of our Yakama Nation citizens, from ensuring public safety to protecting our natural resources and securing a future for our children. First, land is central to our identity, governance, and our economy. However, we are struggling with a large backlog of probate appraisals, yet we have only one full-time appraiser. This bottleneck prevents basic land transactions such as leasing and federal trust transactions from moving forward. We have initiated mass appraisals efforts in partnership with the Interior's Appraisal and Valuation Services offices, but this effort requires sufficient funding. Second, public safety is at a crisis point. The Yakama Nation has jurisdiction over 12 million acres of trust treaty territory. Yet we have only 20 officers, just 1/4 of what is needed. It's unacceptable. We face some of the highest rates of missing and murdered Indigenous women. We are seeing a surge of violent crime, cartel-related drug activity, and the fentanyl epidemic. Without additional funding for law enforcement, our officers cannot adequately protect our citizens and our communities. Third, we have fished on our rivers since time immemorial. When we signed our treaty, 17 million salmon and steelhead returned to the Columbia annually. Today, we're lucky to see 2 million. The Northwest Power Act set a goal of 5 million returning fish, yet we have never come close to that. Salmon recovery funding has failed to keep pace with the scale of the damage caused by the federal hydroelectric dams. This crisis threatens not only our economy and culture, but also the environmental health of the entire region. Fourth, our 650,000-acre forest is in a state of emergency. The Bureau of Indian Affairs has failed to fill key forestry positions, bringing timber sales to a near standstill. The past year, only 2 timber sales were approved. It's a drastic decline. It's leading to lost revenue, job losses, and increased wildfire risk. Without immediate action, the economic and environmental consequences will be severe, both for the Yakama Nation and the broader region. Fifth, education is fundamental to our future, yet the Yakama Nation Tribal School is 70 years old and in disrepair. The Bureau of Indian Education has assessed the condition as poor, yet we are told that a replacement could take up to 30 years. It's unacceptable. We urge Congress to significantly increase funding for school construction. Our students deserve a safe, modern learning environment. In closing, the federal government has a trust and fiduciary obligation to the Yakama Nation, one that must not be eroded by budget cuts and freezes. Federal studies such as the Quiet Crisis from 2003 and Broken Promises from 2018 show that tribal governments remain severely underfunded compared to non-tribal governments. Before any budgeting or cuts to Indian programs are considered, Congress must first ask whether tribes have reached parity with non-tribal communities. Until that standard is met, funding reductions are not just unjust, they are a violation of the treaty and trust commitments. We call on this committee to ensure that tribal funding is not subject to indiscriminate reductions, but is instead protected and enhanced to reflect the true cost of fulfilling federal obligations. Honorable committee members, this is not just a policy discussion. This is about upholding the legal commitments that this country has made to the Yakama Nation. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I welcome any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing up the issue of salmon. Something that's near and dear to my heart, as you well know. When we think of the number of salmon that we've lost that aren't returning at the Yakama Reservation, go upstream. to the Nez Perce Reservation, and they got 4 more dams to go over up there, and it is devastating what's happening. And they're going to go extinct, frankly, if we don't do something about it. But that's a tough thing to change people's opinion of what needs to be done and stuff. But it's going to get done, and from my opinion, we have tried for 50 years to overcome the impact of the dams on the lower Snake River and Columbia River and stuff. Until you get rid of that obstacle, you know, that's a lot of dams for a salmon to come over to cross to get over to the highest altitude, most pristine spawning area for salmon in the world, and that's in the upper reaches of the Salmon River in Idaho and stuff. So it's a little controversial, but we started the discussion, and it's got to happen. But anyway, thanks for bringing that up. You mentioned the nuclear power facility.
Yep.
And you said that your reservation routinely gets flooded because of the dam that was built. Is that?
Yep.
Did I?
Yeah, there's a lock and dam built just south of us in the 1930s.
And that causes flooding on your reservation.
It does. Yep.
Does it cause any problems with the nuclear facility?
Yeah, there's been times where they've been close to, getting to the alarming stage, but thankfully it hasn't hit that level yet. But yeah,
I understand the concern of storage of the spent nuclear fuel at these facilities. We've been trying to fix this since I think 1986. We were supposed to take over control of this stuff, and we were supposed to have a permanent geological repository. That was a cave in Yucca Mountain in Nevada. Obviously, that hasn't gone through, but we've still got to solve that problem. We can't have the spent nuclear fuel spread all across the country at different power plants and everything. Cost of securing it and stuff is just so much more than finding a central repository for it and that kind of stuff. We're still working on it, trying to get that done, but I understand your concerns and stuff, so we'll work on that. But I appreciate your testimony on these issues, and Indian Health Service is something we certainly have to address, and we have been addressing it, trying to address it, and getting it up to where it should be. So thank you all. Ms. McCall?
Thank you. And it's always good. There's a lot going on, and you brought up the importance of the environment, the importance of salmon, not only for economic but for cultural reasons too. So thank you for sharing that, along with what you brought up about what you need for public safety, which we're hearing from a lot of the tribes on it. And I know we're trying to figure out what to do to make that more equitable. As the chairman's pointed out, lots of times we put money into hiring, and people get hired, and then they get hired away from the tribes after they get some experience. Ms. Miller, thank you for your years of working in human services and understanding the needs of our children and family, and for pointing that out. I'm going to take a second, Mr. Chair, and kind of focus a little more on Prairie Island, all politics being local. So in the 1930s, when that nuclear power plant was, before it was sited, a dam went up. And when that dam went up, it changed the reservation's boundaries without any consultation. So the reservation lost land and then lost more land because of the flooding that the dam has. It was in the Minnesota State House and voted against the state of Minnesota storing the nuclear waste, not because we don't have to have safe places to store nuclear waste. And I always vote with you with Yucca Mountain. I get a lot of people upset with me, but I'm always there. That's my promise to Prairie Island and to the state of Minnesota. But you can literally be on the powwow grounds where I've been, where you do a wonderful job of everybody having fun and at the same time recognizing all the wonderful veterans from the communities around Indian country. And the kids, when they're on the swing sets and they're pumping their little legs to go up, they're looking right at these cast storage. And so, Mr. Chair, now you've been my verification for what I've said for years about I'm going to move heaven and earth to get nuclear waste out of the floodplain of the Mississippi River. So to this point, when you talked about the Elk River run that you've purchased, they're not talking about moving the casino or the powwow grounds or any of that, but just to get people, when they go to bed at night, not be worried about an evacuation from either a nuclear mishap flooding or whatever, they are totally, you did a pretty good job, but I'm going to ask you to go a little farther about how you're landlocked in.
Yes,
You only have one way out.
correct.
Could you please, just for the record, so that these
Yeah.
folks know I'm not exaggerating when I'm pleading your case?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, we're in a unique situation with the nuclear power plant and then the lock and dam, and then we also, one way in, one way out is also could potentially be blocked by railroad too. So we have a railroad that goes straight across it, and so and trains are getting longer, and just the hazardous waste that they're hauling, and so we call it the three threats that we face on a daily basis. And so, you know, the purchase of the Elk Run property is to provide an opportunity for our members to live in a safe environment and live and sleep and not have to worry that, hey, if something happens, we're gone, you know. We run drills on a yearly basis with FEMA and the state, and the last drill, it had a minor event, and it was a minimum of a 2-year evacuation. So, you know, that's our homelands, and that's where, you know, my relatives lived, and you know, that's where I grew up. And so, you know, this is some true concerns and threats that we face on a daily basis that, you know, I'm fortunate that the previous leadership have put plans in place, and I'm here to make sure that we continue to see that through. So
Mr. Chair, I bring this up because everyone has unique circumstances, and it's life, health, and safety for all the tribes and everything that everyone is testifying for. No takeaway from that at all. But the way the Sioux Nation was treated in the past under the territory of Minnesota, where our territorial governor put a bounty of $250 on, I won't even describe how they described what they wanted for proof. It was very vulgar, very dehumanizing. And what happened to the Sioux Nation after they went and took rightfully what was owed them in food supplies that our territorial governor was not allowing the tribe to have, instead starving them to death. And now this happening in the Prairie Island community and the other Sioux Nation around. They have suffered more than enough at the hands of the federal government and at the territory of Minnesota. We are making it right in Minnesota. I hope we can make it right at the federal government. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here. And the theme has been, as last year as it is this year, that good health care, safe community, and good schools lead to higher life expectancy, at which Indian Nation has suffered the most since COVID, a loss of life expectancy of 6 years down to age 65. Secretary Selam, you said you have 2 million acres and 20 law enforcement officers?
So we have a total of 12 million acre treaty territory and only 20 officers, which is 1/4 of what we need.
Okay. Legally, what is the number that you should have according to the government?
We should have closer to 78 to 80 officers.
Is that based on population or acreage?
I believe both.
Do you have the funding to pay for 78 law enforcement officers somewhere around $100,000 a year?
No.
Do you have recruits who are willing to, do you have 58 recruits waiting to come to serve as law enforcement officers?
I wouldn't have that information, but I don't believe we would.
The tribal police are from the tribe, correct?
Yes.
So again, I'm from just south of Dallas. I have no tribes in my community. So this is a learning process for me. These are not meant to be leading questions. So if the funding came to you to provide for those, which it should under the treaty, and if you have a treaty, it's confirmed by the United States, it's an obligation, it's not anything else. It is an obligation to the tribes to provide what we have promised. So my question is for, and everybody sitting in here is, are there enough folks willing to serve your communities as law enforcement officers to provide the need that the bare minimum of what you need? And it's an honest question. I know a lot of folks serve in the military. We have a lot of veterans who have served proudly in the military, and so I'm just curious if when they come back or in your communities right now, are they willing to serve as law enforcement officers or not?
I would say I believe that they would be. But it would need sufficient funding. We would need to be able to be competitive with the local governments, with their local police and sheriffs. Oftentimes we have recruits, we have tribal members that are willing to go and go through the training to become police officers, but because of the lack of funding, because of the lack of pay, they often go to those local governments. And so I do believe that if we can adequately fund our law enforcement and provide the wage that is competitive with local governments, that we could fill those spots.
Well, let me ask you this. What is the median income for people in your tribe?
I know it is well below the state's.
40,000?
I would say lower than 40.
Lower than 40.
I don't have the exact numbers.
So if you were to receive the funding to pay $70,000, because I'm assuming cost of living is not that bad, $70,000 for an income would be good. Would that be enough per law enforcement officer, not including equipment and training and all the other things? I'm talking about pay.
I think the
recruit.
real question is to have parity with the local governments. And so we could pay 70,000, but if local government's paying 100, 120.
Yeah, and that is the deal. Because in my communities, in my district, I have some sheriff departments that pay above average, and the ones who train them around in the surrounding community pay less, but they'll train them. So as soon as they're done training, then they'll go somewhere else. So that's the answer. That's where the funding should be based off of. And you are owed that money because life expectancy depends on safe communities. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Ann, you mentioned schools, and I know that we've got to do a better job of building schools because it could take forever to get a school built and stuff. And I know that's something that's been critical to Ms. McCollum's thinking when she was chairman and other things, and we've been trying to get the resources to do that. But I've been out, as an example, in South Dakota, and I've been to a couple schools that literally I wouldn't send my kids to because they're dangerous.
Mr. Chairman, I forgot. That was about, did you say 30 years is what BIE told you?
Yes, so a 70-year-old building, and we have to wait up to 30 years for a new one.
I'm sorry, is that a joke?
No.
It should be.
Yeah, I know it.
Because that's
actually what we need to do is the Department of Defense did a real good job because they got a huge budget of doing education around military bases and stuff like that. We need to look at that and see how we could mirror that or something like it to build schools for kids because I mean that's the future.
That's why I went there.
Yep, I know. I understand. Thank you all for being here, and thanks for bringing up salmon. It is, you know, the Nez Perce are we call those the salmon people, and what a lot of people don't understand, this is not just being able to go out and catch a salmon. This is religious for them, you know. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Jared Michael Erickson, William Bill Iyall. Is that close?
Close, thank you.
Okay, and Ron Allen. Welcome. Jared, you're first.
There, it's on. All right. Well, Hasselhalt and Chase, Squeeze, hello, good day. My name is Jared Michael Erickson. I'm the chairman for the Colville Confederated Tribes. Appreciate Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, and members of the committee for allowing me to testify today. The Colville Tribe is a confederation of 12 Aboriginal tribes and bands from across eastern Washington State, northeastern Oregon, Idaho, and British Columbia. The present-day Colville Reservation is in north central Washington and established by executive order in 1872. That was ratified by Congress as well. The Colville Reservation covers almost 1.4 million acres and is the largest Indian reservation in the Pacific Northwest. Like other Indian tribes nationwide, the Colville Tribe is concerned about the short and long-term impacts of the recent executive branch actions related to the federal workforce. For the Indian Health Service purposes, the Colville Tribe is a direct service tribe. This means that the IHS provides all health services from delivery of care to billing using federal IHS employees. As the committee is aware, tribes that have already contracted functions under the Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act are in a much better position because of those contracts. Once in place, cannot be unilaterally reduced except with congressional direction. With more than 200 deferred resignations of BIA and more than 400 on the IHS side, this is the worst possible time to be a direct service tribe. If any BIA or IHS positions are eventually eliminated, tribes will likely not be able to contract them and the capacity will be lost. In 2020, IHS awarded the Colville tribes one of the joint venture facility construction projects for a new clinic in Omak, Washington. The Omak clinic is scheduled to open this November. Health provider positions were already notoriously difficult to fill in rural areas. The recent administration actions will make recruiting for these new positions much more difficult, if not impossible, because of the perceived instability of federal employment. The Colville tribe is trying to contract IHS functions as fast as we can for two reasons. First, we want to prevent the IHS functions that we want to contract from slipping away due to personnel actions. Second, we want to be able to recruit for the new OMAC clinic positions and emphasize that these will be tribal, not federal jobs, in hopes of improving our ability to fill those positions. We assume other direct service tribes are trying to do the same. The Colville tribes request that the committee include bill language in the FY 2025 and FY 2026 bill that will allow tribes to contract BIA, IHS, and Bureau of Indian Education functions at staffing levels that existed as of October 1, 2024. This will ensure that intervening executive branch actions do not have an effect of gutting those functions and rendering them useless to contract under the 638 law. Shifting these federal positions to tribes is consistent with the administration's effort to shrink federal workforce. But we need time to be able to solidify these contracts and make this transition happen before these functions vanish. One other issue I'd like to mention is law enforcement. The Colville tribes has a fraction number of officers it needs to patrol its 2,200 square mile reservation. The Colville tribe urges the committee to provide a significant increase to the applicable accounts for law enforcement officer salaries to enable tribes in all BIA regions to hire more officers and to retain the officers they currently have. My written testimony provides more detail in our recommendations on this issue. I want to thank you all for allowing me to testify, and I would be happy to answer any questions the subcommittee may have.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, distinguished members of the committee, the subcommittee. I am Bill Iyall. I'm chairman of the Cowlitz Indian Tribe. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today and your commitment to providing much-needed funding to Indian country. The tribe respectfully requests that the subcommittee prioritize health care, public safety, and co-stewardship of federal lands and resources, and economic development and new energy development opportunities. First, we respectfully request the subcommittee continue to fund IHS and tribal health care programs at least at current levels. Our clinics serve thousands of patients every year, both native and non-native. The tribe compacts with IHS to provide health care services from clinics in Vancouver, Longview, DuPont, and Tukwila, Washington. We provide basic health care services, mental health, state-of-the-art drug treatment services. Continued funding and adequate federal health care workforce will help us continue to do that. Medicaid funding is also critically important to sustaining current programs. Reimbursements from Medicaid supplement IHS appropriation and assist us in meeting our tribe's health care needs, as well as the greater community. IHS and tribally operated facilities are exempted, or should be exempted, from further restrictions. Appropriations for IHS fall far short of meeting health care needs. It's critically important that you maintain or increase funding levels for IHS and tribal health. And next, critical that funding is increased for public safety and law enforcement. The Cowlitz Public Safety Department, like many tribal departments, suffers from lack of adequate funding. Our police must patrol a large service area covering our reservations and some distant tribal properties. The tribe provides law enforcement services to several adjoining communities and calls for services through our mutual aid agreements, and calls for services increase every year. The tribe would like to hire more police officers, but there's no room. Our public safety department currently operates out of 2 modular buildings, and that includes the tribal court as well. So the police officers do not have adequate office space or detention area or holding cells. Public access is limited to small area, and we have no place to store evidence, records, or equipment. Additional federal funding for tribal public safety would help us meet some of the basic law enforcement needs to protect our members, our business, and our local community. Funding should be made to strengthen partnerships between tribes and federal land managers. Tribes have a unique and historical knowledge as well as resources to help the federal government better manage and conserve federal lands. Resources through co-stewardship agreements. For generations, the Cowlitz have lived and cared for natural resources that are part of our tribe's homelands. The tribe looks forward to working with federal agencies like the Park Service to provide historical and cultural context for the visitors. Funding to support these partnerships will benefit tribes, federal land managers, and the public that uses and enjoys the federal lands. Finally, more funding is needed to support tribal energy projects. The Department of Interior plays an important role in permitting and through approval of energy leases for tribal energy resources and through its Indian Energy Service Center. Providing funding to Interior supports that tribal energy projects is important and will in turn support industry and economic development. Investing in tribal Indian energy development will allow the tribes to help America increase domestic energy production by developing energy resources on Indian lands. As the original stewards of land, the tribes have the knowledge and experience to responsibly develop energy resources while caring for our land and surrounding communities. Additional BIA funding and staff are needed to provide better support and provide all types of energy development on Indian lands. And thank you for your time. I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Ron?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee member. It's good to see you and good to be back here again. So Ron Allen, CEO, Chairman CEO for Jamestown Selam Tribe, for the record, and thank you for accepting our testimony with regard to our priorities and things that are important to us. The Jamestown Tribe is in sync with the rest of Indian country with regard to base budget needs of the organization. We're very supportive of the Congress continuing to support advanced funding, and you well know that we continue to advocate mandatory funding for BIIHS and Indian programs, which we think is relative to the trust obligation to Indian country. We know it's a heavy lift, but it's something we want to continue to ask of this committee and the full committee. Our tribe has many issues like everybody else and looks for trying to enhance the base funding for all the different programs that BIIHS, et cetera, provide services for us. But our tribe, which is located west of Seattle on this Olympic Peninsula, and we are the first tribe that actually took over full management of our national refuge from the Park Service. And but our challenge was the refuge we took over, which was actually 2 refuges out of 6. And the 2 refuges we took over are the 2 that actually people use and visit annually. The problem is that the park would only provide, 1/3 of the actual money that they use to administer that refuge. But we wanted to do it, and so we decided that we're going to jump in and see if we can get some help back from the Congress on this matter to basically correct what we felt was an unfair negotiation for their share of what they truly use to manage the refuge. So we get around $600,000. We're asking for a $1.14 million for that function to take over to manage that refuge. We feel that we are willing to not only make commitments to the refuge and its purposes and sustain its actual statutory intention. And we're very excited about it. It's in our backyard. It's right in front of our village, and it's a great opportunity for us. So we would hope that you would take a serious look at it, and we look forward to answering any questions with regard to that matter. The second issue that I wanted to testify is I'm a commissioner, U.S. presidential appointment to the U.S.-Canada Pacific Salmon Treaty. So we negotiate the salmon resource from Alaska to British Columbia and on down to Columbia River up to Idaho. So it's a very complicated process. We're asking for continued support there in the BIA budget to serve the 24 tribes that I represent. We need resources in order to help us deal with the very complicated biological analysis that we do in terms of figuring out what is the status of each of the species and each of the stocks of the species. As you well know, it's very different all the way up the Columbia River. It's true on the coast. It's true in Puget Sound and so forth. So, and we're getting in the middle of renegotiating what's called an annex within the treaty. It controls the 4 species and all the stocks of the species. And our 24 tribes have to be right at the table. So we're asking for a continuation of the rights protection money. I think it's around $4.7 million, so that we have the ability to continue that effort. We'll provide you a little more detail in the future about that issue. So our job is to get the salmon up the Columbia River, to the Snake River, and over the dams that you're trying to remove. So we're on the same page. It would be a lot easier, and you would be very delighted with the production that can come out of those rivers. So anyhow, so that's an issue that is very important to us, and I hope you look at it favorably. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate all the testimony that you gave us on these issues. And I could sit and talk salmon forever, but it probably shouldn't be on the record. But you can get anything you want if you'll return Idaho salmon. That's. I keep telling people it's going to require a change of behavior. And, I mean, we've tried everything else. And changing behavior is hard. But we need to stop thinking about what we've currently got and look at what we want the Pacific Northwest and salmon runs to be like in 25 and 50 years from now, because the decisions we make today are going to make those determinations. And that's why I've been willing to kind of get out on that limb and start the discussion. It's got to happen. We got to make some changes. But it has been challenging, to say the very least.
If I might, Mr. Chair, we've removed a lot of dams.
Yep.
And we know how complicated they are because of the interest groups, the stakeholders, but there are solutions to those projects. And we can be a part of that solution. Thank you.
I understand that we've removed about 500 dams every year in this country. I mean, from very small ones and to larger ones and stuff. And you look what they're doing in the Klamath Basin. I'm very interested to see what happens there when those are gone. But when they did the Iyall River up in, I mean, everybody was shocked how fast salmon came back. Yeah. Everybody thought it'd be 4 or 5 years before they came back. No, the next year they were. Yeah, it's amazing what happens with them. So anyway, thank you all for being here today and your testimony. And Betty?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief. So all of you are on the northern border like I am in Minnesota, and I hear you loud and clear. The only thing we want to have heated discussions with our brothers and sisters in Canada, First Nations in Canada, is fish and hockey. Other than that, we're all good. We're all good. Our flags fly next to each other on both sides of the border, our state flags, our national flags, and I hope we can get back to just talking fish and hockey. Thank you very much, Mr. Erickson, for your testimony. I took out my phone, not to be rude, but you're the first person that I've heard testify from your tribal nation, Mr. Iyall. Am I saying your name right? And so I pulled up a picture. Absolutely beautiful, could be Minnesota, except for the long boats that look like they were racing boats that you had the kids in, and then your paddles are pointed on the end. Could you tell me why your canoe paddles look so different and why your boats are so long and narrow? Very different from what our boats look like, except for what the fur traders had.
Yeah, it's a simple matter of just resistance to the water, I guess. It flows smoothly, and the length is for stability out in the seas, and the paddles. You want the water to drip off, not into the boat, into the canoe. So, yes.
I'm hearing what you're saying about having wet pants when you're canoeing if you're not wearing shorts. Well,
Sorry.
Thank you for that. I didn't think you do fresh and salt water. You do it all.
Yes.
I only have to do fresh water. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I appreciate it. And Jared, I want to get up to Colville Reservation, and I might take August and just start driving and visiting the tribes all the way down the Columbia
Should come
River.
in August. We have our stampede. You can see the suicide race we do with our men have horses. They go off the suicide hill down in the Okanagan River. And it's a race. And you can come and see it. You're more than welcome. Invited Mr. Cole's been out. We've had others from a lot of delegation come out and see it. So you're more than welcome to see the suicide race. August is perfect.
I
It
don't know
is.
that I would. I'd change the name of that if I went.
You see it, you'll understand what it is.
Yeah, I understand. It's like going at the fair. We had the Eastern Iowa State Fair in town that I grew up in. They had horse races there, and they always had the Indian horse races, and everybody had to go watch those because
It's like a straight
it's
drop
the
off
bareback and
into
stuff.
the river, swim the
Yeah.
river.
Yeah, hang on is what it is. Yeah. Anyway, thank you all for being here today. We appreciate your testimony. And
down 84 from you.
yep, I know you are. I know you are, and we look forward to seeing you. Thank you.
Thank you all.
You bet.
You're welcome anytime.
Take my wife and my dog and just go on a trip down the Columbia River and visit all the tribes along the way. It'd be kind of interesting.
Kathy and Charlie. Or just
Well, yeah, Kathy'd have to go to. Okay, next is Quintin Swanson, Tom Strong, and Steve de Los Angeles. How are you doing? I'm doing good. What's your name? Thomas. Thomas? Yeah. All right. Is this Thomas Jr. as opposed to, yeah? And Steve, I've got to ask you, I have never seen Los Angeles as a last name.
It's my comes from my father's last name, and he was from his grandpa was from the Philippines.
Okay,
So,
interesting.
yeah.
Okay, Quintin, you're first.
Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Quintin Swanson. I'm the chairman of the Shoalwater Bay Indian Tribe, a small coastal tribe in Washington State located on the north shore of Willapa Bay. I'm here today to remind this body that the federal government's trust responsibility and treaty obligations to tribal nations are not optional. They are legal commitments that must be fulfilled regardless of shifting political priorities or budget debates. For centuries, my people have lived along the shores of Willapa Bay, but today our very existence is at risk. Shoalwater Bay is losing up to 130 feet of land per year due to coastal erosion. According to the Department of Ecology, since 1881, we have lost over 2.1 miles of land. At any moment, a 9.0 magnitude earthquake along the Cascadia subduction zone could trigger a tsunami that would wipe out our entire community. Scientists have confirmed that this event is not hypothetical. It will happen. It's not a matter of if, but when. Even without a tsunami, rising sea levels will completely submerge Tokeland by the end of this century. This is not speculation. This is based on projections from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. We can't afford to wait. We need immediate, coordinated federal action to protect my people before it's too late. The only viable long-term solution is mass relocation. We have taken the initiative. We have purchased 5,000 acres of land at elevations between 300 and 400 feet above sea level where we can rebuild safely. We have worked with federal agencies, consultants, and experts to map out a strategy. This project will require more than $400 million to complete. So far, we have been able to secure less than 10% of the funding that we need. The process of piecing together funds from multiple agencies, each with their own restrictions and limitations, is slow, inefficient, and costly. The federal government's current approach simply isn't working. The U.S. government created our reservation in 1866. It has a responsibility to ensure that our people do not become refugees in our own homeland. There is a clear solution. The TERRA Act, introduced as H.R. 7859 last Congress, would finally allow tribes like mine to access federal resources in a way that makes sense. Chairman Simpson, I thank you for your leadership in co-leading this bipartisan bill. Now, I urge the subcommittee to support its swift reintroduction and passage. The TERRA Act would create a one-stop shop at the Department of the Interior where tribes can integrate and coordinate federal resources for disaster preparedness, relocation, and climate resilience. Right now, we must apply for dozens of different grants across multiple agencies, each with their own deadlines, reporting requirements, and restrictions. This bureaucratic maze is costing us valuable time. Time is something that we simply don't have. Modeled after the successful 477 program, which streamlined federal job training resources for tribes, the TERRA Act would provide the same efficiency for relocation and disaster response. This legislation is widely supported across Indian country, including by the National Congress of American Indians and the National Indian Health Board. The time for action is now. Beyond relocation, my tribe faces another crisis: chronic underfunding of the Indian Health Service and the Bureau of Indian Affairs. I urge this subcommittee to support mandatory funding for contract support costs and Section 105L leases, ensuring that tribes have the resources we need to provide health care, sanitation, and critical infrastructure to our people. Additionally, I call on you to protect and expand funding for tribal programs. These programs are not diversity initiatives, and they're not discretionary spending. They are legally mandated obligations based on the United States treaties and trusts with tribes. Additionally, too often, decisions are made without consulting tribes, and the results are devastating. The federal government has a legal duty to engage in government-to-government consultation before making policy changes that affect us. Ignoring this duty isn't just disrespectful, it's a violation of federal law. In closing, I would like to invite each of you to visit Shoalwater Bay and see firsthand the urgency of our situation. We've done everything in our power to protect our people, but we can't do this alone. The next tsunami will not wait for a budget cycle. The rising ocean will not wait for another funding round. Please help the Shoalwater Bay tribe to protect our people and to preserve our way of life. Thank you for this time and for the opportunity to speak today. My full recommendations are available in my written testimony. Masi, thank you.
Thank you. Skokomish Indian Tribe would like to thank the chairman, the ranking member, and other members. Am I on? Oh, sorry about that. The Skokomish Indian Tribe is responsible for providing essential governmental services to the residents of the Skokomish Indian Reservation, which is a rural community located at the base of the Olympic Peninsula with a population of over 2,000 people that includes about 700 tribal members. The tribe provides services through various departments: administration, community development, information services, early childhood education, which includes Head Start, education, health clinic, housing, legal, natural resources, public safety, public works, and Tuareg family services. The tribal government also works closely with community members to identify needs and prioritize services. Adequate federal funds are critical to the tribe's ability to address the extensive unmet needs of our community. Some areas that I'd like to focus on particularly include law enforcement. We've increased funding for BIA public safety and justice programs at the tribe's expense. The Skokomish Department of Public Safety provides 24/7 law enforcement services for the tribe. The Public Safety Division also is responsible for patrolling and enforcing justice both within the tribe's 5,300-acre reservation and throughout the tribe's 2.2 million acre treaty area, where the tribe has treaty-protected hunting, fishing, and gathering rights. But with only 7 officers available for day-to-day patrol activities, individual officers often work alone. Understaffing exposes both the community members in need of assistance and the public safety officers to undue danger. Unfortunately, this is public safety's reality. And to meet mandated responsibilities, staffing must be increased. Vacancies due to illness, training, and other leave force the chief of police to handle patrol duties. Budget limitations severely restrict overtime. In addition to this, the Skokomish River is the most frequently flooded river in the northwest United States.
It is something that can be Googled, and oftentimes it will, due to flooding, landslides, and other issues, we may be, for all intents and purposes, on an island. The reservation then becomes the only cognizant authority in the area to provide for emergency management and services. And so we've taken it upon ourselves to heed those responsibilities regardless of funding levels and offer assistance to the surrounding communities should they be cut off from public safety or emergency services as well. We also strongly support continued funding for the BIA's Trust Natural Resources Management programs, increased funding to foster sustainable stewardship and development of natural resources, and support fishing, hunting, and gathering rights on and off our reservation. It's important and it's also essential for our folks who depend on natural resources for their livelihood and cultural well-being. For example, the Pacific Salmon Treaty Grant supports the tribe's federally mandated salmon sampling program. And throughout the entire salmon season, and to ensure proper management of the resources, we must collect and scale and coated wire tag sample Chinook and coho, scale samples from chum on 20% of our catch. This information is then used to determine run size and allows fisheries managers to properly structure fisheries. Current funding levels have been sufficient to achieve this goal. Without proper funding for this program, it will become very difficult, if not impossible, for the tribe to ensure the safety of ESA-listed salmon and may result in a loss of treaty-reserved resource and our members' ability to support themselves with that resource. This also could lead to limited opportunities for recreational fishing in our area, which is a major driver of economic resources into the region, as folks come from outside of the area to come and take advantage of not just the resource, but the beauty of our homeland as well. So we urge Congress to increase the current level of funding for this very vital program. Hatchery cyclical maintenance funds are also invaluable for supporting the federal government's investment in tribal hatcheries. Most tribal hatcheries are underfunded, and each year brings more decay to the facilities. Here, too, adequate funding for hatchery maintenance is imperative to prevent these important pieces of the salmon restoration puzzle from crumbling. The tribe needs wildlife program funds not only to support biologists, but additional funding is required to staff 3 dedicated wildlife enforcement officers who will not only enforce the tribe's regulations, but ensure that poaching of the tribe's wildlife resources does not occur from outside entities who sometimes fail to recognize the tribe's treaty rights. This also will ensure that the resource remains available for all citizens in Western Washington State as well. Additionally, with Indian Health Service, the Skokomish tribe supports increased funding for the Indian Health Service. We would like to see more funding for long-term care facilities to address the needs of those addicted and suffering with opioid addiction at this time. We've invested heavily in workforce development programs to help offset that as well, but we need all funding for all legs on the stool to help support that. Strongly support the request to exempt IHS from any future sequestration, and we fully support the legislative proposal to reclassify contract support costs as mandatory funding. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and we'd entertain any questions.
Thank you, Tom. Steve.
All right. Good afternoon, Chairman Simpson and members of the subcommittee. My name is Steve D. Los Angeles. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Snoqualmie Indian Tribes Tribal Council. I'm currently serving on my 4th term on the Tribal Council, and it is an honor to speak with you today on behalf of my people. Thank you for the opportunity to testify and to share pressing matters that impact my tribe. Today I'll focus on issues that are critical to the well-being of our tribe and our ability to protect and honor our cultural heritage. First and most importantly, I will begin by addressing our tribe's ongoing efforts to restore, protect, celebrate the sacred Snoqualmie Falls. Snoqualmie Falls is a majestic 268-foot waterfall on the Snoqualmie River.
Is that what the bead is?
Yes, this is what the bead is here. Thank you. It is not just a natural landmark. The falls are sacred to the Snoqualmie people. In our creation history, the myths carry the falls, connect worlds, carrying prayers and blessings. This site is central to our ceremonial practices, which continues to this day. Federal government has recognized the cultural and historical importance of Snoqualmie Falls by listing it as a traditional cultural property on the National Register of Historic Places. However, despite this recognition, the sanctity of the falls continues to be desecrated by the Puget Sound Energy's hydroelectric plant, which has been in operation since 1898. This hydroelectric plant diverts water from the falls, disrupting the cycle of the water as it completes its journey down the falls to the plunge pool, where it transforms into the sacred mist that carries our prayers to the Creator. This desecration is compounded by low-flying helicopter tours and disturbs the sanctity of the site, interferes with our cultural and religious practices, and endangers the safety of the 2 million annual visitors to the falls. I was just there at the falls on Monday before I flew out here, and it was beautiful to be a part of that and engulfed in the mist, because we had heavy rains the day before and the week before prior, and there's a lot of water flowing over there. For years, the Snoqualmie tribe has worked tirelessly to mitigate these harms and to ensure that the federal government upholds its trust responsibility to protect this sacred site. We encourage every member of this subcommittee to visit Snoqualmie Falls and witness firsthand so you can better understand the gravity of what we are fighting to protect. Next, I want to focus on the January 20th, 2025 executive order titled Unleashing American Energy, which paused disbursements for programs funded under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. This freeze has had significant detrimental effects on the Snoqualmie tribe, particularly in two critical areas: the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency Climate Pollution Reduction Grant and the U.S. Forest Service Access to Emerging Markets Grant. The EPA awarded Snoqualmie $2.9 million and the USDA awarded $1.9 million in funding under these grants. These grants will be invested in active management of the tribe's forest land to reduce the risks of wildfire and to build our capacity to participate in markets for forest products. But we are currently unable to rely on these funds due to the freeze. This has stalled our ability to cut overstock stands and replant for future harvests. This is unacceptable for the federal government to freeze the funding that Congress has already appropriated for tribal nations. Such actions undermine the trust responsibility to tribes, disrupt vital programs, and jeopardize our ability to address critical issues such as public safety, health, and cultural preservation. We respectfully urge the subcommittee to work with the administration to ensure these funds are unfrozen so that tribes, including Snoqualmie, can access resources Congress has allocated for these essential projects. Lastly, I would like to remind the subcommittee of the federal government's trust responsibility to tribal nations. And to fulfill this trust responsibility, we must ensure that critical programs remain funded and accessible. This includes fully funding Indian Health Services, which is non-discretionary and has been in place since 1976. Environmental protection, clean water and air are essential for sustaining life and supporting tribal communities. Tax parity and economic development. Tribes must have access to tax credits and tax-free bonds to create jobs and improve community infrastructure. And when considering budget decisions, it's critical that both parties in Congress uphold the federal government's trust responsibility and respect the government-to-government relationship with tribes. This means that tribal programs are fully funded and that tribes have the tools they need to thrive, and none of this falls under the concerns related to DEI. In closing, I want to thank the subcommittee again for allowing me to testify today. It's been an honor, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here today and for your testimony. Beautiful country that you come from. It is, you had a, it sounds like everything's in the past, but you had a great representative in Derek Kilmer that I truly enjoyed working with on these issues, and he certainly had your interests at heart as he worked to solve some of the problems. But they're still there, and I suspect they will be for a while. That we have to keep working on it. That's just the way it is. But I appreciate what you have to say in your comments, your priorities for this upcoming fiscal year. I look forward to working with you. It's kind of interesting. You mentioned dams. Some of the different panelists have mentioned dams and the impact on dams. And I support hydropower. That doesn't mean you need to dam anywhere, anytime. In fact, we've clogged our nation's arteries, and we need to, and frankly, we need to clean them out in a lot of places. So anyway, thank you all for being here today. Betty?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had the wonderful opportunity when I was chair, and some of the staff is here with me, to go up into Washington State with Congressman Kilmer. And we learned about natural resources from timber to salmon to oysters. It was absolutely amazing and wonderful to be there.
You can keep all those oysters to yourself.
I eat oysters, but it was truly amazing and very different from the northern area that I'm from, where the waters are a little more still. We don't have as many Minnehaha waterfalls is lovely, but it doesn't compete with what you're talking about. But I just want to thank you, Mr. Swanson, for reminding us. As I said, all politics is local. I know Prairie Island's plight very well. Your plight is different because it's what's happening in our environment and what can happen in tsunamis. Those are challenges that the creators put forth, but the creator also gives us the gifts to handle those challenges. And so I look forward to learning more about how we can help many of the issues that are facing the tribal nations from Alaska, Oregon, and Washington State. And so the committee is very, very aware of that. Mr. Strong, thank you for bringing up IHS and sequestration. I spoke to it briefly yesterday. I don't know how this works. There's a rumor of a year-long CR. That could also possibly trigger a sequestration, and so I'm going to be talking to the members of this committee as well as the members of the Native American Caucus, where I'm Chair Emeritus, what we can do to not repeat the inadvertent mistake that happened last time with sequestration. I didn't vote for it. I didn't think it was a good idea, but we all thought we had protected all the health care for the citizens and tribal nations across this country, and it was a huge fail when the court said we didn't do it right. So know that I'm on it. I'm working on legislative language. And to your point, Mr. De Los Angeles, I've been very public, about the way this administration's gone on about finding ways of finding fraud, waste, and abuse and inefficiency. I think it's inefficient. I think it's created more chaos than they ever thought it was going to create. But if we want to do what's right in Indian country, we need to consult you on how we can be more effective. Where there is waste because it's not going as directed as it could be for the tribes to use, that's waste. And the tribes know where that is and know how to fix it. So we should be looking and consulting with you on how to fix those inefficiencies within our government, whether it's energy, whether it's environment, whether it's healthcare. You have the answers, you have the solutions, and that was my promise to the Native American Congress when it was just here a couple weeks ago, and I spoke before him. We need to listen to you when it comes to that, and we hope that we can be a bridge between you and the White House to do just that. So I thank you all for your testimony, and thank you so much for bringing the future of our nation. I'm the present, you're the future. So I want you to study hard, do well, and I'm so glad you were here today. Thank you. Miigwech.
Chairman, thank you all for coming all the way out from Washington. Derek Kilmer was a fantastic proponent for you, and by y'all coming down here, though, I can promise you that we'll honor Derek with continuing to recognize the unique difficulties faced by the Washington tribe specifically, and how there are a number of different issues that are facing you that don't face some of the other tribes in the Midwest. So we will endeavor to make sure that especially the salmon, and the chairman beats the drum on salmon all the time, but especially water, nuclear waste. It's a unique ecosystem up where you live that has to be protected. And I echo what Ms. McCollum said about the sequestration, is that we have to not allow that to happen again. And finally, Tom, thanks for being, is this Thomas?
Yep.
Thomas, thank you for being here today. You are the future. What do you want to do when you grow up?
I want to be an author, or what my dad's doing.
What do you want to write about?
anything really, but I really want to write like, I wouldn't say scary books, but like thriller books.
Okay, okay.
He's a big Stephen King fan.
Really? Okay, all right. Well, thank you all for coming here. I yield back.
Thank you all. I appreciate you being here, your testimony. We look forward to working with you as we try to put together this budget for the next year and actually finish the one for the last year and try to address the priorities that you've pointed out. Thank you.
Thank you all so
You bet.
much.
Okay, our next panel is Eric White, Glenn Gobin, Winnie Johnson Graham. Those sound familiar to anybody? Yeah. Any one of them.
And you got it right.
You're really trying to feed those, aren't you? Yeah, that's what these are. Thank you all for being here today. Eric, you're first. Yep. Yep.
Well, good afternoon, and Mr. Chairman Simpson, thank you for having me here, along with Ranking Member Pingree and members of the subcommittee for holding this hearing today. My name is Eric White, and I'm the chairman for the Skokomish Tribe of Indians. I've been the chairman for the past 5 years, and have served on the tribal board of directors for the past 13. Skokomish Tribe, I just heard you guys talking about it up in the beautiful Washington area. We are located in the northwest of Snohomish County near Arlington, Washington, and we are the Stillwater, or also known as the River People, who have lived along the Skokomish River in the Puget Sound since time immemorial. Our tribe signed the Point Elliott Treaty in 1855 and has continued our cultural traditions of hunting, fishing, gathering, as well as acting as stewards of the local fish and wildlife populations. Our tribe was federally re-recognized in 1976, and since then our tribe has worked to restore our ancestral homelands, and our reservation now spans 66 acres, and we own over 4,000 acres of additional trust property. The tribe consists of just under 400 members today. Before you today, I just want to address the impacts of the recent developments in Washington, specifically federal funding freezes on tribal programs and ongoing restoration efforts. Specifically with the following, we applied for and received, so the first is the Wildlife Crossing Program, specifically designed to address critical issues of wildlife vehicle collisions while simultaneously enhancing habitat connectivity for both terrestrial and aquatic species. In 2024, the Skokomish Tribe applied for and was awarded a Wildlife Crossing Pilot Program grant to design and construct a wildlife overcrossing structure near Red Cabin Creek, which is on Highway 20, the North Cascades Highway, located in the Point Elliott Treaty area. Our project aims to reduce wildlife vehicle collisions by improving habitat connectivity for elk and other species. We collaborated with a very unique project where we collaborated with our relatives in the Upper Skagit Indian Tribe and have partnered with WashDOT and others while receiving input from local stakeholders and landowners as well as other tribes in the area. Our findings have identified the Red Cabin Creek area as a focal point for collisions and priority for highway safety mitigation. These wildlife crossing structures are proven to be effective methods at reducing wildlife vehicle collisions and help with public safety and improving habitat connectivity for a wide range of species. At the beginning of this year, we were set to begin utilizing the funding for this project, and on January 20th, 2025, the administration issued an executive order which imposed a freeze on disbursements and the program funded under the bipartisan infrastructure law. This funding freeze disrupted our tribe's ability to begin construction of this important project to our region. And we understand the funding may have recently become partially available, but we're asking for assurances that all the funding awarded to the tribe is made fully available so that we can continue this project. Next, we wanted to touch base on 3 other important programs for our tribe's culture and traditional lifeways. All 3 need significant increases to ensure progress. First is the EPA's Puget Sound program. The Skokomish Tribe uses these funds for habitat restoration, ecosystem monitoring, and fish population recovery. and have expanded our capacity to address environmental challenges of the Salish Sea watershed. The second is the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's Tribal Wildlife Grants Program, and the Skokomish tribe has been able to conserve species, restore riparian zones, and improve wildlife populations in the region. The third is the Rights Protection Implementation, or RPI, program, and it's a program that is utilized by 49 other tribes, including Skokomish, and the funding supports critical conservation and management efforts of tribal fish and wildlife resources. As a point of note, we are members of the Northwest Indian Fish Commission, and we strongly support all of their funding requests for fiscal year 2026. And basically, to recap, the Skokomish tribe just wants the subcommittee to protect and preserve our wildlife crossing pilot program grant that we already, and increase the funding for the Puget Sound program, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Tribal Wildlife Grants Program, and the Rights Protection Program. These programs are vital for protecting culturally significant resources, ensuring the continued stewardship of our ancestral lands, and addressing the environmental challenge. And I just want to personally thank you for allowing me here to speak today and taking this into consideration. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, and members of the subcommittee. My name is Tichuk Glenn Gobin. I serve on the Tulalip Tribal Council, and we thank you for the opportunity to testify today on funding for Indian country. The Tulalip Tribes is located 35 miles north of Seattle, not far from Skokomish. Tulalip is the third largest employer in Snohomish County, resulting from economic and tribal government growth. Despite this, we still face many challenges. The fentanyl epidemic is compromising public safety on the Tulalip Indian Reservation, placing tremendous external pressure on our police department. Not unlike others across the nation, Tulalip has had over 70 tribal member deaths attributed to fentanyl overdoses since 2018. We have taken numerous steps in response, but until tribes have criminal jurisdiction over non-Indians who manufacture or deliver controlled substances, such as fentanyl, within the reservation boundaries, attempting to battle Mexican cartels and other organized crime without being able to prosecute them, and minimal funding is extremely difficult. Today, Tulalip self-funds 90% of its police department budget from economic enterprise revenues. Public Law 638, tribal self-governance funding, and grant funding composes the remaining 10%. We thank you for the fiscal year 25 bill that provides significant increases to tribal public safety and justice. We would like to see a comparable increase in fiscal year 26. But these increases must be realized by tribes in all regions of the country to help combat the fentanyl epidemic activities on our reservations. Conversely, any reduction of public safety funding would cause direct and grave harm to our communities. Tulalip Tribes urges the committee to increase funding for the Rights Protection Implementation, RPI, program that supports implementation of federal court actions, including U.S. v. Washington, that affirmed our reserved rights to fish in all usual and accustomed areas as co-managers of the resource under the Treaty of Point Elliott. The tribe appreciates the fiscal year 25 amount of $50,790,000 for the RPI program, which is a $1.6 million increase over enacted levels. An additional $2 million at a minimum are needed for tribal hatcheries in the fiscal year 2026 budget. Our hatcheries are critical for salmon stock and orca recovery efforts, and we could not meaningfully exercise our treaty reserved rights without the support of tribal hatcheries that supplement the supply of harvestable fish for tribal fisheries and the non-Indian sports and commercial fisheries. We have over 20 tribal hatchery restoration and maintenance projects, all in differing stages without sufficient funds to complete them. The Department of Interior is charged with bringing land back into trust that were lost or taken without consent during the Indian termination area for the purpose of increasing or for the purpose of increasing tribal land base. This is a treaty and trust responsibility. The fee-do trust process is cumbersome, complex, and a lengthy process largely carried out by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, often taking several years to transfer one piece of fee land into trust, even for land within a tribe's own reservation. Delays lead to increased costs for tribes in providing critical infrastructure to their communities and can cause financial hardship for tribal members. We are very concerned with the administration's effort to reshape the federal workforce, leading to the termination of over 100 BIA employees, including approximately 15 employees in the Pacific Northwest region, a department that was already understaffed, and in disregard of the unique government-to-government relationship or legal obligation to Indian tribes and their members. To meet its legal obligation to Indian country, funding must be available to fund BIA employees in an adequate level to support the trust responsibility. We thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on these critical funding measures for Indian country.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Winikisak. Natasuis Winnie Anoisqua Johnson Graham. Nutamas Masipia. Good afternoon, Chairman Simpson and Ranking Member Pingree, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. I introduced myself in my language. My name is Winnie Blue Girl Johnson Graham, and I am from Mashpee. I am the Vice Chair of the Mashpee Wampanoag Tribe. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today about our tribe's funding needs and priorities. We greatly appreciate your commitment to providing the critical funding for Indian country. First, I ask that you prioritize funding for our roads. It has been very difficult for our tribe to engage in meaningful economic development because we lack basic infrastructure. On our 170-acre reservation in Taunton, Massachusetts, only one road runs through the entire property, leaving much of it inaccessible and undevelopable. Road construction is extremely expensive, and we do not have the funding for it. And making matters worse, the large winter storms and the frequent are in our region, and we are forced to spend the modest transportation funds that we have on snow and ice removal during the winter. This leaves little for road construction. A greater investment in the BIA road maintenance program will help us address these challenges and is needed to help address the significant funding backlog in our program. Additional federal resources are also needed for critical infrastructure. Our tribe is seeking to acquire more land into trust for economic development, but funding constraints limit our ability to improve these parcels. Many of them are currently undeveloped, dilapidated, and in dire need of rehabilitation. Congressional investment in our infrastructure for that tribal projects will empower us to develop our economy and move closer to economic self-sufficiency. Next, I want to underscore the need for the funding to support our tribal justice system. Our court case workloads has increased by 75% in 2024. Our lack of economic development opportunity directly impacts our ability to adequately fund our court system. This has led to a backlog in resolving criminal cases and issuing eviction and protective orders. Funding available from the BIA is extremely limited, and in the recent BIA report, estimates that the unmet need for tribal courts is close to $1.5 billion. Amongst other things, our courts need funding to establish case management system and upgrade our AV equipment used to record hearings as well as hire additional personnel. We also are working to codify our tribal laws and reform our constitution to ensure consistency, accuracy, and compliance. A well-developed legal and judicial system is necessary for attracting business development on our reservation, but reform requires resources that we do not have. And for all these reasons, we urge the subcommittee to appropriate at least $70.4 million to tribal court systems in fiscal year 2026. Funding is also needed to address public safety. The tribe has a reservation land both in Barnstable and Bristol counties. Given a geographic reach, we really need about 12 police officers to patrol our reservation, but we do not have the funds to hire those additional officers. We also need a dispatch center for a permanent base of our operations for our police department, which currently operates out of a police cruiser and 2 modular trailers in Barnstable and in Bristol counties. Neither the trailers nor the cruiser are equipped to handle basic law enforcement functions. Further, our tribal police do not have a secure facility, office space, a detention center, processing center, or holding cells. There is nowhere to securely store evidence, records, or equipment. In addition to our police department desperately needs updated technology and communications equipment, tribal police are unable to communicate with surrounding police departments with other law enforcement agencies because of the limited telecommunications resources. We cannot even communicate with our own officers between our reservation locations. Existing federal funding for tribal public safety is totally inadequate. A recent BIA reports that Congress estimates that we have unmet the public safety for and justice programs in Indian country as more than $3 billion. Congress needs to provide more resources to address law enforcement challenges and support the critical public safety needs in Indian country. Thank you for your time today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Glenn, let me ask you, what do you do when you find a group, cartel, a gang, whatever, doing fentanyl on your reservation, either making it or distributing or whatever? What happens to them now?
We arrest, charge them.
Mike.
We arrest them, and since we don't have criminal jurisdiction, we bring them over to either the Snohomish County Courthouse and ask them to pick up and prosecute. They will typically take the case in, review it, and turn the individuals loose. Feds may step in and we petition them to pick it up, but oftentimes they're shorthanded also, and so the end result is, in most times, they're turned loose to go back into the public. They forfeit their illegal drugs, but they're back out in the community doing the same thing. The lack of criminal jurisdiction is what stymies this, and
right.
We all want to be part of this, fixing this fentanyl epidemic across this country, but because of legal jurisdictional questions, creates a loophole for them to thrive on Indian reservations.
Well, I appreciate that. It is, this has come up several times yesterday and today about the frustration I feel and others feel about the jurisdictional issues that happen, and I'm kind of one of those that think you ought to be able to have jurisdiction over your lands and be able to do what is right there. And I mean, I talk to officers that in Lapway or something, they'll stop somebody drunk driving down the road, down the highway and stuff. Have to call a state policeman to come, and the state policeman, it might be a priority for him, might not. Might be there for 2 hours waiting for a state policeman and then letting him go. You know, somehow we got to solve this, and it's not an issue that we can solve in the Appropriations Committee. That's not our job, but it's something we need to do in the Authorizing Committee, and look at how this jurisdictional issue is such a challenge for all of us and stuff. We need to change it. You need to have more jurisdiction, particularly on your reservations, whether it's a white guy that commits the crime or whether it's another Indian or an Indian from another tribe or whatever. You know, you need to have that jurisdiction.
We thank you for that.
So we'll keep working on that. Eric, I was just curious. This is a strange question. What's your diet? Not your personally, but your people's in general.
Just basically, just like the average person, but we like to sneak in a lot of, fish and other seafood and game.
Yeah, but it's a large fish and seafood diet, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. But the funding is because our stock is so limited that Glenn here, and these guys take our fit. No, I'm just kidding. They're at the headwaters, and so they get more, and we really only get very few Chinook that come
Believe
up
me,
the
I'm from
Skokomish
Idaho.
River.
I know being at the end of the ditches.
But that's why, to us, that funding is so important, because, you know, there are so many people that are grabbing those fish before they get to us.
Exactly.
Including Alaska, Canada, and other tribes out when they're out, you know, in the Sailor Sea. So it's important.
Tribes are entitled to 50% of the take of salmon on the river, right?
Yeah, 50% of nothing is not much.
Exactly. When the numbers go down, you don't have much. Huh, interesting. Representative Pingree?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I apologize for being late, so I didn't get to hear your testimony, or most of yours. But I do appreciate you spending the time with us here today. And Vice Chair Johnson Graham, as a Massachusetts tribe, we're neighbors. I represent Maine, and Maine, of course, used to be part of Massachusetts till 1820, and we still hold that against Massachusetts. But
I agree.
consider you close neighbors. And it sounded like from your testimony, you're a very under-resourced tribe. Of the 3,200 enrolled members that you have, do people live on the reservation, or so you do have housing? And
Do have housing
there's
on a
community there,
reservation,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry for the challenges that you're facing with law enforcement and being under-resourced, because I'm sure, particularly, you know, in the area that you're in, there's a lot of challenges, and whether they're jurisdictional or just lack of personnel.
Yes.
I hope we can do more to get you the support that you need.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you
Well,
very
nice
much.
to have you with us today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Honored to be with all of you. Thank you.
It's always been kind of interesting to me that from the West, we always think that Indian nations are in the West. We don't realize how many there are in the East, too, and that's, you know,
Yes.
kind of interesting.
I hear that a lot.
I'll bet
most
you do.
people wouldn't think there was, you know, any tribes left in Massachusetts. We heard from a Connecticut tribe earlier, but New England does have tribal residences and tribal residents.
I did hear that they thought the last Native American was gone a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I can go back to the 1600s. My husband and I both are Wampanoag, and I can go back to the 1600s with my lineage. So
Yeah, a deep part of our history,
Yes,
absolutely.
yes.
One of the counties in Idaho is named Oneida County. I didn't realize it was named after Oneida Indians from New York.
That's correct. That's correct. If you look at a lot of the names, they all come from Native American names, you know, for the ponds. But
I appreciate you all being here today. It is very educational for us.
Thank
you. I appreciate your telling us what your priorities are and what we ought to be looking at as we put together both the 2025 budget, if we can get it done, and the 2026 budget as we move forward. So thank you all.
Well, thank you.
we can, Tom, that means gladly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You bet.
Tapatash.
And our last panel for this afternoon's hearing is Robert. Oh, they're going to challenge me now. Robert Blanchard, Boo Nygren. Is that anywhere close? Yeah. All right. Tahisa Hill. Tahasa. Okay, Tahasi. Guy Kopelman. Is that close? What is it? Kapolman. Okay. I was never much at linguistics and pronunciation and that kind of stuff.
How are you? Good to see you.
Robert, you're first.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, ranking members, and members of the committee. My name is Robert Blanchard. You nailed that one. Chairman of the Bad River Band Lake Superior Chippewa Indians, also known as Mishkazibi. Mishkazibi is a river and coastal wetland along the western region of Lake Superior, reserved in the Treaty of 1854 and signed on Madeline Island, which is the largest of the Apostle Islands on Lake Superior. We work hard to become self-sustaining to provide for our culture, economic, and social well-being of our people. We are in the Lake Superior Region Reserve Territory and the communities of Odena, which in my language means we are the people of the heart, where they gather. We put our people and families first. A large part of our foundation is our land and waters. We depend a great deal on the subsistence resource such as wild rice, fish, maple sugar, migratory birds, and plants used for medicines. It is our belief that taking care of our environment will sustain a healthy way of life for us and future generations to come. I travel here today to sit before this committee to talk with you about issues that directly affect my people's ability to care for our environment and to sustain a healthy way of life, which are interconnected with the safety of our communities. First, public safety. In comparison to all other communities, Indigenous people experience substance abuse and unintentional injuries often related to violence at the rate of 2.5 times higher. The differences argues forcefully for a focus on a fully and well-trained staff of law enforcement personnel in Indian country as one of the greatest public safety policy priorities. Currently, we address law enforcement by agreements with local law enforcement agencies for contract services under a combination of federal community-oriented policing services and state law enforcement assistance grant funding. The Bad River Tribe has reviewed the law enforcement needs of the community, and a huge concern of the tribe and the people is the time it could take for a response of a life-threatening situation, depending on where the county is and the response comes from. It could take 30 to 45 minutes from far reaches the southern part of our county, and Odena is located in the northernmost part of our county. Odena communities average a 20-hour to 1-hour ratio in calls for responses versus law enforcement engagement in community activities. Significantly, more funding is necessary to change this ratio for our communities. Bad River alone would require more than $432,000 a year to recruit and competitively provide wages, training, and benefits to retain law enforcement staff. And I appreciate the committee is already engaged in this issue under Public Law 283-280. However, current funding levels are inadequate to the needs of Indian country, and every tribal nation must receive the funding for law enforcement to protect the well-being of our people. Secondly, the Bureau of Indian Affairs education programs is interconnected with all of our communities. Educational programs, for example, take our Head Start and Early Head Start program, which is managed by the Indian Education Program, which also manages library services, homeschool coordinator services. Our Head Start and Early Head Start serves 66 children. We employ 32 qualified individuals ranging in age from 19 to 72 years old. Each one must complete extensive background checks to ensure that we surround our children with the best possible staff. We implement a strong focus on school readiness. 14 of our students have early education plans as our staff is trained to notice developmental delays so they can identify learning disabilities and development delays years before they start kindergarten. Our students receive services such as speech, physical therapy, and occupational therapy while they are enrolled at our center, helping them literally get a head start when it comes to their education. And lastly, I just want to mention we currently operate a fish hatchery that is not only important to our tribe but to the whole region. Maintaining and funding for the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative is needed to restore healthy fish populations, protect our waters and habitats from invasive species, and overall improve the health of Great Lakes coastal wetlands. So on behalf of the Bad River Band, I thank you for allowing me to speak to you today on these very important issues. Miigwech.
Thank you. Next is
Good. Yate, Chairman Simpson, it's good to see you again. Ranking Member Pingree, Yate, members of the committee. I want to say thank you so much for allowing me to share a few minutes with you all today. My name is Dr. Boo Nygren, Navajo Nation President. It's an honor to serve in this capacity. So again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share a few words on behalf of the largest land-based tribe in America with over 400,000 citizens. Despite our size, we continue to face the same challenges as you've heard throughout this afternoon, is that Indian country continues to struggle with generations of crumbling infrastructure, limited access to health care, underfunded law enforcement, and an ongoing fight for clean water. These issues aren't just numbers in a budget. They represent the daily realities of Navajo families and Indian families across Indian country as well. So today I'm here to remind, as you've heard today, the federal government's trusts and treaty responsibilities to the Navajo people are not optional, that they are not tied to political cycles, and they are promises that must be kept. And sequestration and budget caps threaten the critical services our people rely on. These cuts don't just mean fewer dollars, they mean elders waiting longer for medical care, families struggling without running water, and emergency responders stretched even thinner across the Navajo Nation at 27,000 square miles. Navajo programs should not be subjected to the same cuts as discretionary spending. And we urge you to exempt Indian country programs from sequestration and provide stable and advanced appropriations for both Indian Health Services and the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Public safety is another crisis we cannot ignore. Right now, the Navajo Nation only has 218 officers to patrol a landmass the size of West Virginia. That's one officer covering hundreds of square miles throughout the day. Response times can stretch for hours, leaving families very vulnerable. Just last year alone, the Navajo Police Department received over 200,000 calls, more than they could ever respond to with the current staffing needs of 218. We need more Navajo police officers, additional resources, and full funding for our law enforcement so that we can continue to make sure that our families feel very safe throughout the day. And when visitors crisscross our lands from Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah, they feel protected as they travel through our nation. Emergency medical services are also in dire need of support. When someone calls for an ambulance, they may be waiting up to 45 minutes or longer if an ambulance is even available. As I mentioned, the Navajo Nation spans one of the most iconic areas in southwestern part of the United States, and there's times when we have non-Navajos that travel through our nation, and when ambulances are called for, that takes 45 to an hour. Sometimes it all depends on availability. So my hope is that we can continue to make sure that we support our EMS teams to answer. They answer currently 20,000 calls a year, and their funding increases haven't been increased in decades. This is a matter of life and death. We ask for a dedicated funding for our tribal EMS, including a $4 million allocation specifically for the Navajo Nation. And then our children's futures are at stake as well. When it comes to the Indian Child Welfare Act, it was designated to keep Native children connected to their nation, their culture, and their identity. Our Navajo ICWA program faces a $3.4 million shortfall. Without full funding, we cannot provide the protection and the services our children deserve. This is not just a budget request, it's about keeping our families whole. Another challenge we face is the lack of broadband access across the nation. In 2025, reliable internet should not be a privilege. As mentioned earlier, 27,000 square miles, the size of West Virginia, that we should have the broadband that's needed. In many Navajo households, parts of Navajo, students still have to travel very long distances just to get connected to the internet while sitting in vehicles. An example, some of them sit out fast food restaurants, gas stations, or try to be able to find internet at the local chapter houses. Again, clinics struggle to offer telehealth. Businesses cannot be competitive. Congress must continue to help us with tribal broadband and continue to make it a priority to increase funding to ensure tribes have access to spectrum to build their own networks. And also, I cannot leave today without speaking about the unfinished business of uranium cleanup. As mentioned, over the years, there's over 500 abandoned mines still contaminate our lands, our water, and our people. Some progress has been made. Very thankful that we have started, but at this rate, it will take centuries to fix the damage that was caused with uranium mining all across Navajo. We need a real commitment from the federal government with a long-term funding plan that fully addresses this toxic legacy. Lastly, water is life. The Navajo Nation has waited for too long for the water rights settlements we are owed. These settlements are not just obligations, they are necessary for the survival of our communities. A future cannot be built without water. We urge this committee to ensure full funding and implementation of these settlements. Despite all of the challenges that we face, many people continue to step up. Our people continue to step up time and time again to provide support to the United States. Our Navajo code talkers and Navajo uranium miners sacrificed so much to make this country what it is today. The treaty signed with our ancestors were not symbolic. They were promises made between our nations so that we can all thrive. We kindly ask the United States to respect the Navajo Nation and uphold their end of the treaty. Thank you for your time. Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Iyall.
Yes, Suguli Swagawake. Greetings, everyone. Honorable Chairman Simpson and Ranking Member Pingree and members of this committee. I'm honored to be here today on behalf of the Oneida Nation. The Oneida Nation is a Title IV and Title V self-governance tribe that serves a tribal population of 17,308 citizens. Oneida Nation has a $750 million annual economic impact in our region and is one of the largest employers in Brown and Outagamie counties, with approximately half of our 2,390 employees being non-Oneida individuals from neighboring communities. Our government provides an array of services to our community. Employees and tribal citizens include health care, behavioral health services, police protection, housing, public works, sewer and water infrastructure, family and child welfare services, environmental, health safety, banking, childcare, education, educational programming, food security, transportation, and more. One of the areas is the exempt tribal programs from funding pauses and staffing reductions. As the current administration works to implement new policies, we urge Congress to work with tribes to educate administration officials as to our unique government-to-government relationship and to use federal resources to fulfill the treaty and trust responsibility to tribal nations. The United States fulfills its trust and treaty obligations through both the direct delivery of tribal programs and services and through provisions of federal funding to tribal nations. These funds help us deliver essential tribal programs, including healthcare, public safety, and education. These programs are not discretionary. They are legal obligations rooted in treaty and trust obligations, the United States Constitution, and longstanding federal statutes. Our request is to make it clear that all federal programs that serve tribes should be exempt from funding pauses and staffing reductions. Clear guidance from Congress and the administration is needed to protect tribes from inadvertent harm and to ensure that tribal access to federal resources appropriated by Congress is not interrupted. The next subject would be support for expansion of tribal self-governance. As Congress considers policies to increase efficiency and reduce bureaucracy, I'd like to point out a successful Indian policy that helps achieve these goals: tribal self-governance. Tribal self-governance reduces federal bureaucracy, expands local decision-making and control, gives tribes greater flexibility to redesign programs and plan for the long term. This has led to better services and improved health, welfare, and quality of life for tribal citizens. Self-governance has been transformational for the Oneida Nation, providing a great control over our health care programs and law enforcement, which has allowed us to focus our efforts on prevention and empowering our nation to build capacity by training our own citizens to fulfill these roles. The nation strongly encourages Congress to expand tribal self-governance authority to other federal agencies that serve tribes, including authorizing self-governance demonstration projects for tribal programs within the United States Department of Health and Human Services, and authorizing permanent self-governance authority to the USDA for food distribution, self-determination demonstration project. Law enforcement. Oneida Nation is proud to operate our own police department covering reservation boundaries of over 100 square miles and over 27,000 residents. We have established collaborative relationships and parity with local law enforcement agencies through intergovernmental agreements, and our officers are cross-deputized by county sheriffs. Unfortunately, tribal law enforcement remains extremely underfunded by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, with the Oneida Nation receiving less than $140,000 annually for law enforcement through its 638 Self-Governance Compact. This covers less than 3% of the annual operating cost of the Oneida Police Department. The current funding covers the partial salary for one officer out of 30-plus positions in the Oneida Police Department. Last year alone, the nation contributed over $5 million to operate our police department. We are fortunate to have resources to cover these costs, but many other tribes throughout Indian country do not. Even with our budget contributions, our police department still has unmet needs that remain unfunded. Tribes in Public Law 280 states like Oneida Nation also face the misperception that we do not have public safety needs. This could not be further from the truth. Our police department responds to thousands of calls for services each year within the boundaries of the reservation, with over 18,000 calls in 2023 alone. Due to lack of funding, our police department is consistently short-staffed. This is a public safety concern. Operating at minimums allows us to respond to one serious call, accident, or medical situation at a time. With additional public safety funding, we would be able to hire more officers, providing a better service to our community, as well as expand our programming to hire community resource officers to help prevent and deter crime. Oneida Nation strongly supports increased Bureau of Indian Affairs law enforcement funding for all tribal public safety programs, including those in Public Law 280 states. Increased tribal law enforcement funding would provide transformational relief to address the systematic public safety issues facing our tribal nations. There are dozens of other vitally important programs within the Interior, Environment, and related agencies, appropriations bills that are important to the Oneida Nation, but however, in the interest of time, I'll conclude my remarks. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you again for this opportunity, and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you. Guy?
Is that on? There
Yep.
we go. Clark Butchquash. Hedgenon Choctaw to Queen Iyall. Good afternoon, Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, and members of this subcommittee. Thank you for this opportunity to testify before you here this afternoon. My name is Guy Capoma, I'm the president of the Quinault Indian Nation. Quinault Indian Nation is located in the southwestern corner of the Olympic Peninsula. We have over 200,000 acres of land within our reservation. Forests, rivers, lakes, mountains, 30 miles of coastline, and over 4,000 enrolled tribal members. Today I'll focus my testimony on several critical issues, including number one, the executive order freezing IRA and BIA and OMB funding. Number two, increased funding for the BIA Tribal Community Resiliency Program. And number four, advance appropriations for Indian health services. Through treaties and executive orders and other agreements, Indian tribes, including the Quinault Indian Nation, ceded hundreds of millions of acres of our homelands to the federal government. In return, the United States made promises to provide for education, health, and welfare of our tribal citizens. For the Quinault people, the promises of the United States were detailed in the Treaty of Olympia of 1855. Unfortunately, the federal government has consistently failed to meet those treaty obligations. Chronic underfunding, worsened by economic factors like inflation, continues to impede the Quinault Nation's ability to deliver essential services to our tribal members. We have been forced to supplement inadequate federal funding to meet those needs of our tribal members. On January 20th, 2025, the administration issued an executive order titled Unleashing American Energy, which halted disbursements for programs funded under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. This funding freeze has significant detrimental impacts on the Quinault Indian Nation and other tribes as well. The decision to freeze funding that Congress has already appropriated for tribal nations is unacceptable to the Quinault Indian Nation. Such actions undermine the federal government's trust and treaty responsibilities to tribes, disrupt our essential programs, and hinder tribal efforts to address urgent challenges such as infrastructure development, public safety, and cultural preservation. We respectfully urge the subcommittee to work with the administration to immediately unfreeze these funds and ensure that tribal nations, including the Quinault, can access those funds. As we have previously testified to the subcommittee, Quinault has two major villages, a village of Queets and a village of Tohola. And we're in the process of relocating those villages to higher grounds. And through the high tides, high winds, and storm surges, it creates a safety hazard for our tribal members. To continue the process of relocating those villages to higher ground, we need additional funding to do that. Because of this urgent need to expedite the relocation, we asked the subcommittee to increase the funding to the BIA Tribal Climate Resiliency Program to $50 million in FY26. And this will ensure that we can continue that process. In 2023, the subcommittee made historic strides in safeguarding the health and well-being of tribal communities by securing advanced appropriations for Indian Health Services funding for 24 and 25. We thank you for that. We thank you for that. We request that the subcommittee include advanced appropriations funding for Indian Health Service for fiscal year 27 at a minimum of $5.2 billion as part of fiscal year 26 Interior, Environment, and Related Agencies Appropriations Bill. The Quinault Indian Nation remains steadfast in our commitment to protecting our tribal members, our lands, and our culture from the adverse impacts of systematic underfunding, environmental threats, and violence against Indian populations. However, we cannot achieve these goals alone. And as our trustee, we're asking for your help to do these things. And with that, we thank you, Seokwio, for this time to talk to you here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here and for your comments and suggestions. I've been up to in fact, two of the most enjoyable days I've had in a long, long time, several years ago when David Obey took me up to the Apostle Islands. And I still want to go up there and spend like a week out on one of the lighthouses and just stay there, because beautiful country. But it is, yeah. So you do the wild rice up there? Yeah. Great. How did the Oneida Indians get from? They were in New York originally, right?
Correct. Yeah, we
Now you're in Wisconsin?
moved to what was then called the Michigan Territories in the 1820s and 30s. So we were moved to Wisconsin before Wisconsin was a state.
Okay, interesting. As you know, we went down to our committee. Several of us went down to the Navajo Reservation, and I fell in love with Window Rock. I want a house there. It's beautiful country there, but we'll get down there again.
Yes,
I
that'd be great.
appreciate it. You mentioned you wanted climate change relocation fund
Right.
up by $50 million. Do you know what the total cost of your relocation would be?
For the total cost we're looking at is $400 million.
400.
And we've probably invested at least 25 up to this point. And that's both through the feds and the state and tribal coffers. And so to get to that point, to move two villages from housing to business to government operations, it's going to take quite a chore to do that. But, you know, it's in process.
I appreciate it. You all come from beautiful places, so sorry you had to come to Washington, but no, we need to get out and see your places too. So anyway,
That'd be great.
Representative Pingree?
Yeah, thank you all for testifying. I appreciate it today and appreciate you coming from a long ways away. I know when Derek Kilmer was on the committee with us, he spent a lot of time talking to us about the relocation of the Quinault Nation. And I think it's an issue we're going to continue to deal with on a grander scale. I know in Alaska, some of the tribes have had to relocate, and you're one of the first sort of domestic tribes that's really undertaking it on a big scale. So
I agree, yeah.
It's we're going to learn a lot from what you're doing. And thanks for bringing up that tribal resiliency grant. We've heard from other tribes that was one of the areas of funding that's still being blocked. So I think we need to get that loosened up and make sure that the funding we've already appropriated, it's hard enough for us to get money into the budget and get new money, but that was money that was going to tribes, so that's a big concern. And Dr. Nygren, nice to see you, and thank you for kind of giving us a sense of the scale of a very large tribe. And really, we talk a lot about, to tribes of all sizes, but the magnitude of the need of a tribe as large as yours and the amount of funding that is still a shortfall for you is really staggering, and we need to make sure we're meeting the needs of all the tribes. And appreciate hearing from the Wisconsin members. I grew up in Minnesota, so, next door neighbor, but, and again, so many of the same concerns about law enforcement and other needs, and we're going to try to get all we can in this round of appropriations, but thank you for being here today.
Let me just follow up one question I had is that when we were down there, one of the issues that they took us around as we drove across the reservation and stuff was housing. And you had real issues with housing. Is that still a big issue?
Yeah, definitely a huge issue. We still have a demand of about 30,000 plus homes that need to be built on Navajo. But a lot of the challenge is making sure that we have the infrastructure in place. So we've really been trying to figure out how do we continue to make sure, especially on the Arizona side, and I think that's where the water settlement is very key, is so that we can build out the main water lines that could possibly feed a lot of these homes that are needed. So again, housing is definitely still a huge challenge on Navajo because we have about 200,000 plus that live on the nation and about 200,000 that live off the nation, kind of come on and off the nation throughout the weekends, depending on where they're working in the country. But again, yes, housing is definitely a huge need, and I think that's where a lot of the BIA housing money that does come out. This past year, we were able to do some money that I've been really big on making sure that we try to spend a lot of the funding that does come through BIA. And I think it was around 50 homes that we're able to provide this coming year through some of that BIA housing. But again, 50 houses sounds like a lot, but when in terms of the scale of the nation, as you mentioned earlier, it's a large, vast, and then some of the challenges, just the remoteness as you visited the community out there. But again, as a nation, one of the other things I want to thank this committee, thank Congress, and thank the United States too, is a lot of the ARPA funding. We're going to be able to put out a couple hundred houses on the Navajo Nation using ARPA money. So this coming year and next year, we're going to be able to do, I think we're up to about 700 plus houses. That's going to include a house, including water, electricity, and septic and drain fields as well too. So that's one of the things that we've really been focusing on Navajo is like, why can't we do it? Let's come together and really put some of the resources that comes down from Washington. So I want to commend this committee, commend Congress and the United States for helping us with a lot of those houses we're going to put down over this year and next year as well.
Yeah. I suspect that housing is an issue on almost every reservation, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, thank you all for being here today. I really sincerely mean it. And we as I've told everybody, we actually do take your full testimony and read it and see what we can do to try to address it. And thanks for bringing up the issues that we need to be focused on. So thank you
so much.
You bet. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you all for taking time to join us today. We sincerely appreciate all of you coming to testify before our subcommittee. And the committee stands adjourned until 9:30 tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.